don't overthink it. It's really not worth the time you lose. Like every year that you lose,
Yeah.
to save the same amount of money, you have to contribute more every month than you would have if you started earlier because of that compounding that you're losing. So it's better to just pick something and start.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Office Hours. I'm Will Geiger, where I'm unpacking the latest trends in higher education and what those trends mean for students and families. I'm really excited about today's guest, Martha Kortiak Mert, who's the Chief Operating Officer at Saving for College. Welcome, Martha.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, so one of the questions I want to kick things off was just kind of the basic why it's important for families to start saving for college early. I know that we have almost a 16-month-old and something my wife and I thought a lot about. So just curious, you're an expert in this, why it's so important to start saving for college early.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest reason is you have a limited amount of time to save for college. And the later you start, the less time you have for your money to compound and earn more. So I have definitely heard from friends and people I know who have said, "Oh, I didn't get it and I started too late." So they started, in middle school, high school. You can still start and you're still going to benefit of saving. But if you start sooner, your money has more time to grow. You have a better chance of, say, like doubling your money potentially over time if you can start sooner. So otherwise, the later you start, it's more about what you're contributing and you have less of those earnings on top of it. So that's why it's really important to start early. You should start saving for retirement early too, but you have decades to save for retirement. You do have this limited, usually 18-year window to save for college.
Yeah, and I think people sometimes forget that you can even start saving money in a 529 plan before your kids are even born, or before you're perhaps thinking about that, even if you want to get really ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, the best time to start saving, if possible, is before your baby is born. And how you can do that is you can open an account, and of course, your baby isn't born, doesn't have a name, doesn't have a social security number yet. No problem. You open the account, you make yourself the beneficiary. That's completely legal, and you could open an account for a 529 plan for yourself if you want. After the baby's born, after you have the social security number, you simply change the beneficiary. So you can always change the beneficiary of a 529 plan to anyone who is related to the original beneficiary. So that's a great way to get started. And it's also really nice. Say you have a baby shower coming up. One of the things you can ask for is contributions to the 529 plan. So if people want to give you cash, you can put that right into that. So it's a great way to kind of kickstart that 529 plan.
Yeah, no, I think it's just so powerful just taking that first step and just getting the mechanics of the account set up. And then, even if it's a small amount of money, you're, contributing each month from your paycheck or whatever, you just get into that saving habit. And I think with a lot of things, it's just setting up the good system that's going to lead to the, you know, big results of seeing that money compound over time. Um, what do you think the most common misconceptions that folks have about 529 plans?
There are quite a few of them. I would definitely say some of the basics. People think that they have to use their own state's plan. You don't. So you can live in Florida like I do. You could open the New York plan. You could send your kid to California, a school in California. So there's a lot of flexibility there. So that's another misconception, is that they're only for your state's colleges. That's not the case. There are a handful of states that offer a prepaid tuition plan. For example, again, my state, Florida, is one of them. There are a few others. In that case, you are prepaying tuition for your state's colleges. However, even in that case, if you decide to send your child out of state or to a private college or university, those funds can be withdrawn and utilized for that. So even in that case, you're not locked into using your state's colleges. I think the one other thing I would mention is financial aid impact, because I know you also reach a lot of people who are
Mm.
thinking about paying for college as well. So people say, well, if I save in a 529 plan, it's going to hurt me when we go to apply
Mhm.
for financial aid and fill out the FAFSA. Here's the thing. If you have the money to save and set aside, and you're putting it into a savings account, investments in the stock market, mutual funds, whatever it might be, any of those assets are going to be counted on the
Mhm.
FAFSA. You're not going to get the tax benefits, which I know we'll get into a little bit later, of the 529 plan, though, if you're doing that. Plus, 529 plans, whether they are in the parent's name or the student's name, are considered a parent asset on the FAFSA. So that actually benefits you because parent assets um, weigh less than a student asset on the FAFSA. So they sort of maximum of 5.64% of what you have in that account is considered on the FAFSA. So all in all, that shouldn't be a reason not to save. And one other thing I'll add on there, um, given recent changes to the FAFSA and new rules that were introduced a few years ago, um, 529 plans owned by someone else in the family, like a grandparent, are also not counted on the FAFSA. So that's another way, if you want to be able to save and you have grandparents who are interested in helping, that you could think about reducing that financial aid impact.
Yeah, no, that's a really great reminder. There's been, a lot of changes to the way 529s can be used, and even, the some of the other like educational expenses that families can use them for, I think is really exciting and makes it just a really helpful financial tool as you're just thinking about education more broadly. Um, I a couple months ago was able to speak with Saving for College and Backer CEO Jordan, which was really interesting. And yeah, it was actually after that episode I finally I was a little bit late getting our 529 started, and he just encouraged me just to like, don't obsess over the details. And I was looking at all the advantages of my state plan and really like trying to optimize it as best as possible. And he's just the best thing is just to get started. So I use Wealthfront, which is like a financial tool for some
Hmm.
other things, and it's like, all right, I'm just gonna start this in Wealthfront, just
Yep.
to get the ball rolling, and it's cool just seeing
Right.
the yeah, just how like even with like even small recurring contributions each month, it's cool seeing that go up, and yeah, I thought a lot about Jordan just saying that analysis paralysis was one of the top barriers for families. And I'm curious from your perspective where, you know, I know from my experience, when I was thinking about this, where I kept dropping off and not going through with this. But where do you see families dropping off in the process of like, okay, like I'm
Yeah.
sold, this is like a good thing I should be doing, but I'm not actually doing it.
Yeah. So, first of all, congratulations on getting started, and so
Yeah,
glad to
yeah,
know
thank
that
you.
he'll be happy to know that he was able to help push
Yes,
you
yes, it was,
on that front.
yeah, I'm very, 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 very excited to just have that up and running.
So, I think that there are two areas where people get sort of paralyzed. So the first is what you were describing. So it's before you get started. So you hear about 529 plans, you do maybe a little bit of research, you figure out like, yeah, this is a really good deal, I should do this, and then you start looking for the perfect plan.
Yes.
And I think part of what makes it challenging for most people is, unlike, let's say you work for a larger company and you have a 401k, it's just whatever's offered by your employer, and there's some limited set of investments that you can choose from, and that's it. So you're not going out and trying to find your retirement plan, like it's
Yeah.
offered to you. So it is much more of a self-directed type of instrument for most people. That's the reality today, that a lot of workplaces don't offer them. um, so that, it does get to be hard. And people often find, even once they've made that decision that they want to move forward with it, some of the things that I've heard from people is, let's say one spouse does the research, but they want to have some time to talk to the other spouse, so if it's parents, and
Yeah.
agree together, that this is something we want to do, and choose a plan to, make sure both parties are aligned. Or maybe they want to go out and talk to other people that they know and get their advice and information. And so you can get caught stuck in that loop of like researching, trying to find the perfect plan, talking to people, confirming it's a good decision to make.
Yes.
That's the first spot. And I think, you sort of nailed it on the head when you said like just get started, like you finally realized that was important. So I would say for anyone who's trapped in that loop, get out of it. Open a plan, and don't overthink it. you have, because you can change plans. Like you have a lot of options. So get started, start setting the money aside for that objective. Get into the habit, like you were saying, get in, start doing auto deposits and things like that. But the other big area that people get stuck on, let's say you're ready to start, you go to a plan website, you start to fill out the information. It's pretty basic, like your information, like I said, the beneficiary's name and social security. Then you get to a step where you have to choose how the money's going to be invested. And that's another place where people get stuck. So some of them may not realize that that's something that they have to do, that the money's going to be invested and it's not just automatically invested. You have to decide from a menu of investment portfolios where to put the money. And again, then suddenly you get into this mode of like, what's the right thing to do? I'm not sure. And so I think to get around that, once you are ready to open, just check out, and you've decided on a plan, do check out what they offer as far as investment options, so that you can just breeze through. Because really, if you know what you want to open, you're going to breeze through that opening process in just a few minutes, and it wouldn't take you long. So it's more feeling confident that you've made a good choice. And on that note, one thing that I would notice is that all 529 plans now offer what's called they're called either age-based portfolios, target year portfolios, enrollment year portfolios. It's all the same basic idea, which is these are investment options. They're going to be based on your child's age or birth year. And the idea is that they will transition from more aggressive investments in that portfolio to more conservative investments as your child nears college age without you having to do anything.
Mhm.
So you don't have to actively manage, and you can know that while your child is young, those those funds are going to be invested in more aggressive more aggressive instruments like equities. So you're going to have more exposure to the market, but you would also have a chance at getting greater returns. But as your child ages and you want to start to lock in those gains and preserve what you've gained, because you don't want to like have your child be 17 and have a big market drop,
Mhm.
right before you're about to withdraw the funds, these will automatically be shifting more toward bonds and short-term instruments, so that your returns will go down, but they'll also be more secure as you reach college age. So just keep that in mind, that if you're not sure what to do when you first open, you can always just go for the age based or target year portfolios that are offered.
Yeah, I know that's a great thing to call out, and it's something like this. That's the beauty of it, that you do your when your baby is born, you do have some time, and that allows you to be a little bit more aggressive versus just like the idea is not to just like plunk this into something that's like getting a savings account type of yield. The idea is you can contribute and grow this to be substantially more for like a 10, 15, 20-year period of time.
Yeah, and on that note, earlier this, or I guess it was last year, when I don't remember when the tariffs first went in and we had a big market drop. I think that was last year now. The days run together, right? But
Yes.
um, I had, journalists calling me and asking, okay, what, parent, we want to write an article. What should people do in this market who have 529 plans and their kids are about to start college? And it was a good time to remind people, hey, if you had your money in an age based investment, you wouldn't have to worry about it right now that the market's falling. But if you choose to go a route where you're actively managing and choosing more aggressive portfolios on your own, that's fine. Be sure you're going in periodically and checking how that money is invested,
Yep.
so that you don't get into that situation. So you can make investment changes twice a year in a 529 plan. So you have that option. I know in the plan you mentioned, the wealth plan, that's very much set up. They offer different tracks based on your investment risk style. So that's really easy, and you kind of set it and forget it. And I don't think you have to worry about that one.
Yeah, that was just an appealing thing for us, just to, it was number one, something we were already using, and then just, the decision making around how we allocate the
Yeah.
investments. It's like a nice quiz, style flow. There's other good plans as well. Um,
Yeah.
But it was, yeah, just, that wound up being just a nice way to get started and not have to, be worrying about it from a day-to-day perspective.
Yeah.
Definitely a very, very big fan of the just, like, set and forget, you wanna, budget and everything and figure out an amount that you can contribute, but it's very nice just that just goes, off into the Wealthfront account, and we get to see, her, little 529 grow, over the
Yeah.
last year. So, and then, we can obviously also, if there's, gifts or other things, it's a nice, that's also somewhere where we can put other, contributions from family members and friends and such. I'm curious, my experience was I was just best like suited to, just start it and not delay this process. If you were someone who, let's just say this weekend I'm gonna like take a look and assess, like I have like hours of time to be able to assess like what the best 529 plan is. What are some of the things that like should matter? What factors, incentives? And like honestly, as I was going in this process, I think I just wasn't even sure like what to be looking for and was just like a
Right.
little bit overwhelmed by all of the information. So, yeah, I'm curious, like, what
Yeah.
kind of matters for folks who do want to be making a smart decision? I know you had mentioned that certain states might have different incentives for families, and so it
Yeah.
sounds like there might be some considerations when
Yeah.
picking a plan.
So the biggest state level incentive are tax deductions or tax credits. So actually, let's step back a second and
Mhm.
say, so 529 plans, kind of like a Roth IRA, you make contributions to 529 plan with post-tax dollars. So you don't get any federal tax break for contributions that you make to a 529 plan. However, almost 40 states do offer a state tax deduction or credit for contributions to a 529 plan. In most cases, those you have to be contributing to an in-state plan, but there are a number of states that will offer that benefit for contributions to any state's plan. So figure out which your state is. You can find this information on Saving for College. We have a page for every state. You can come and see like what's the state tax benefit, if any. How much can I get? Like it's going to be based on your tax
Mhm.
band, right? But we actually have little widgets too that'll let you calculate what that's actually going to be worth to you in a year. Because that's another thing to consider. Depending on how much you are expecting to contribute, it could be worth more or less, right? So that's something to understand, like whether your state offers a tax benefit, what it is, and how much that will actually save you in state taxes in a year. Those are good things to know to see if it makes sense to start with that one. You can also look at performance history. Now it'll depend on the different investment portfolios, but again, this is information you can find on the plans
Mhm.
website or on Saving for College if you want to get a sense for how have the investments in this 529 plan done over time. One of the things too that you mentioned, I think, is a really important factor: convenience. Is there a financial institution you already work with that offers 529 plans? If you decide maybe your state's tax benefit isn't that compelling or it's not that important to you, you're kind of, or you're in a state that gives you that tax benefit regardless of where you put your 529 plans, that sort of opens it up for
Mhm.
you as well. If you're searching more broadly to see what else is out there outside of your state, um, so a number of large financial institutions that you may do business with already offer 529 plans: T. Rowe Price, Vanguard, Fidelity, Bank of America, Merrill, so a lot of these will offer 529 plans. And so you may just find it convenient to just get started. You've already got an account there, open a 529 plan with that
Mhm.
institution. Also, if you work with a financial advisor, there are what's called advisor sold 529 plans. You don't have to go through an advisor. Advisor sold 529 plans typically have higher fees, but if you have somebody sort of looking holistically at all of your investments and portfolios, and you want someone who can actually help you manage the investments, you don't want to do maybe the age based, that could be a route too. So those are all things to think about it, but to think about and consider, I think, when you're selecting a 529 plan. But I go back to the don't overthink it. You can start today, open whatever is easiest, most convenient for you to open. You can reassess that in the future as you have time. You can roll funds over from one 529 plan to another. You can keep an existing 529 plan if in the future you decide you want to open another one. You can keep the one you have and open a new one. So you have a lot of options, and it's really not worth the time you lose. Like every year that you lose,
Yeah.
to save the same amount of money, you have to contribute more every month than you would have if you started earlier because of that compounding that you're losing. So it's better to just pick something and start.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great reminder for folks, just the power of compounding. And I think it's sometimes you can find like calculators online, or you're probably with like
Hmm.
ChatGPT to like kind of model out just like, what this looks like with kind of an average market return. That's, really, so incredible. Just how that does, compound. You
Hmm.
might be, you know, looking at the cost of colleges and high schools and just how high education expenses, and it's like, oh, like this, this is not going to do anything. And just like it really, really does, just with the years and months of compounding and making those consistent contributions. Um, I guess that's a segue, Martha. I know that
Hmm.
there is, when we look at polling, a lot of people are nervous about the, technologies like AI. Families are questioning whether higher education is worth it. And I think especially for folks who, have young children or babies, they might be thinking like, world has changed so much in the past few years. Like, who knows what this is going to look like 15 to 20 years from now? I'm curious what your take is on that. How folks should be thinking about saving for college given the uncertainties of the educational landscape.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll talk about this a little bit more probably in a few minutes. But one of the great things about 529 plans is they're really flexible in how you can use the funding. But I think what we know about college today, right, is that all of the evidence shows us that people who with college degrees still out earn their counterparts who don't have a college degree, right? So at this time, all the evidence suggests it's still a good investment for people. And interestingly, we continue to see a strong interest. Even high school students are very interested in college, even though we hear a lot about people
Mhm.
questioning the value. I know Sally Mae's report recently came out, How America Plans for College, and over 90 of high school students have some post high school plans. A large percentage of those are aiming for at least a 2-year college, but 2 or 4 year college. So sometimes I think, yes, it gets a lot of headlines, people questioning this. It's all tied up with the student debt question. But really, when we look at it, I think people do still recognize the importance of a college degree. For sure, having some sort of post secondary credential is going to be important, to earning more money. But college is still a place where, people build skills, build relationships that can pay off for them over the course of a career. And there are a lot of good tools out there too that sort of allow people to see what the return is of those. I can share a link to one
Yeah, we
tool
can
with
definitely
you
jump on the in
afterwards.
the
Yeah,
put up in the show notes. Yeah, that'd be great.
yeah, yeah. So that's something that people should, definitely consider. That if to me, if you don't know what the future is, then what's the alternative that you're betting on right now, right? So to me, college, everything it indicates that that's still a good, it's still a good investment for people. But as I mentioned, what's great with 529 plans is you don't have to spend the money just on the traditional college degree. You can, many vocational programs are
Yeah.
included, and more recently, the recent legislation from last year has even expanded the benefits more. So you can spend money on K through 12, both tuition and other costs that people incur. So if you're saving in a 529 plan, you're getting to high school and saying, "Wow, maybe my kid's not going to go the traditional college route. I have extra money here," and you have K through 12 expenses, that's something you can do early. But also post high school, all sorts of credentialing programs are now eligible for 529 plan funds, registered apprenticeship programs. So really any sort of like post-secondary degrees or credential that you're getting, you can spend the money on. And you can also use them for graduate school if the child does go to college and then goes on to earn a graduate degree. So they're very flexible in that way. And just the last thing I'd mentioned too, sort of not non-education direct education expenses that you can now use 529 plans on. One is to pay off student loans, so up to $10,000 per beneficiary per year. So if you have some leftover money and a student has taken out a loan, you can pay down up to $10,000 of that. But also, very excitingly for many people who are on the fence about opening a 529 plan because they were worried about having leftover funds, is that you can now transfer up to $35,000 of leftover funds in a 529 plan to a Roth IRA for the beneficiary. There are some rules to be aware of. You can't do the $35,000 all at once, so you're subject to the annual Roth contribution limits. There's some other things to be aware of there, um, but that's a great option. So if you do end up with extra money, you have options with what you're doing there. So the point is, though, knowing that students are going to need some sort of, if they want to have a career that earns them something, they know they're going to need some sort of like post-secondary credential, and a 529 plan can help you pay for that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really like practical take and just some good reminders of the flexibility of the 529 that is really really important to remember. Just the Roth IRA optionality, the K through 12 apprenticeships, different types of skilling and vocational opportunities. So it's not necessarily
Hmm.
just traditional 4-year colleges.
Right.
I'm curious, and this is a little bit of a selfish question. Is something I was thinking about before this conversation. How do you think about folks the kind of sweet spot of not knowing what educational expenses look like? So trying to strike this balance between not like over saving perhaps, but also not
Right.
under saving. And I know we've seen the trend line at like, different types of institutions just, going up 4-year colleges. Some of them have eclipsed 100K a year, really have no idea like what that's going to look like in 18,
Right.
20 years. So yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are as far as the, question of like the sweet spot of saving.
Yeah. So first of all, a lot of it depends on what you can do, right? So for most people, saving all of the money that they think college may cost in the future may not even be practical, right? And most financial experts will say saving one third to one half is a good number to aim for. But you still have to have an idea of what that cost is going to be. We do have a great college savings calculator on our site that lets you go in and project the future cost of different types of schools. So whether it's a private college, an in-state public, or out-of-state public, they're averages, right? They're based on averages across the nation. We get the information from the Department of Education, but any individual school may be different. But it'll give you a pretty good sense. It will take, today's costs, it will project it forward based on the age of your child to what it could be in the future. But the other thing it does is it also shows you what the average amount of financial aid awarded is. So, because, I'm sure you're aware of the sticker price versus net price.
Yep.
Um, and so people are not necessarily paying as the full cost of attendance as is published, right? Because they are getting different types of aid, whether it's federal financial aid or institutional aid, that cuts that cost down sometimes quite dramatically. It'll often be associated with the parent's income, your FAFSA, and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, but it does also estimate based on your income level, and again, average financial aid awards, what you might expect in the future. So you can get an idea of what not only what the total cost would be, but which can be a very scary number when you
Yeah.
look at it, but also what the net price might be, which starts to feel a little bit more reasonable. And then, you can set different targets within that tool to say, okay,
Yeah.
what if I wanted to save for 50%, what would that look like in terms of how much I need to be contributing every month for the next, let's say, 16 years or something. So you can get some ideas there and start to or you might say, hey, I can afford to save 250 a month now. What is that going to get me? So,
Yeah.
you can play around, get different scenarios, but certainly if you're worried about overfunding, that's a good tool to use to sort of set a goal. But if you're in a position where all I can afford to do is $200 a month or $100 a month or $50 a month, then just do that,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
right.
No, and I think that's just like a practical kind of exercise for just like thinking through all of this. And
Yep.
I agree. I think it's the any not always, but I think sometimes budgeting and just like looking into your finances can be a little bit stressful and
Yeah.
anxiety inducing. But I think taking a step back, it is really helpful just to think about like what this might look like and just starting that conversation. And
Yeah.
when I worked in college admissions and financial aid, and that was sometimes really challenging on very, very end of the process where parents would just like kind of come in and just like the school was just like not affordable. And there just like was this like mismatch and you really like felt for them and their child. But, I always couldn't help but thinking like this, could probably have been, somewhat solved with like, a little bit, of a dialogue and a conversation as like a family and trying to
Right.
set some parameters and expectations around like what this would look like for you.
That's such a great point. Parents, you should have that family conversation. Like, here's what we have available to spend, with your child. So they're aware. And you can still try for schools that are out of that range, but be aware that, you have to see what kind of package you can get at those schools and that the money may not go there. And that's okay too, but I agree, setting some of those expectations up front, shopping around for
Yeah.
schools too. There's certainly like some private colleges that offer a lot more merit aid, while others are only need based, right? So that's something like mix. Kids sort of, when they think about where they're applying, they're sort of thinking about where they want to be, or the type of school they want to be. Those are all good, great considerations, or the majors that are offered.
Yes.
But another part of the consideration set should be like who offers more aid, and those are things you can mix in to your pool of schools that you're applying to, and I think that's very smart to do.
Yeah, or even I think for a student, if you want to become a lawyer and you're going to be going to law school, kind of thinking
Right,
about that as far as like, okay, like maybe that 529 money, you get like good financial aid, you're doing an in-state, more affordable option for undergrad, knowing that you might want
right.
to use that for a pricier graduate program, and you can deploy that in a variety of different ways. Just requires a little bit of like thinking and conversation and planning on what your goals are and how you want to reach those goals.
Yeah. And, one thing that I haven't mentioned about 529 plans, there's no expiration on them. So if you're using a strategy like that, and you have a 529 plan set up for your child, but you're not going to use it, they're starting college, but you don't anticipate using it for another 4 to 6 years because you're going to use it for grad school. Just keep the money in there and it'll just keep growing over that time. And there's no pressure to take it out by any age or any time. So that's another nice thing to know about them.
Yeah, no, that's a really really great reminder for listeners and parents and students out there, that there just is a lot of flexibility. Um, One of the other things I did switch gears a little bit. I'm curious how you're thinking about maybe I guess taking a step back, with I think this summer the Trump accounts are going to be
Yeah.
going live for I guess babies that are born. Well, I guess they get a contribution for babies being born, so
Right.
up to everyone, for children. So yeah, would you be able to share a little bit about just what these accounts are and how they might be similar or differ from 529 plans?
Yeah, definitely. And that'll give us a chance to delve into to some of the things that are unique about 529 plans
Yeah.
that we have talked about a lot of them, um but okay, so Trump accounts are more of a long-term savings vehicle that are being introduced for children. As you mentioned, children born between the start of 2025 and the end of 2028 will be eligible for a you for a $1,000 seed deposit from the government into those accounts. So that's definitely a nice plum for people who are having children right now and can take advantage of that. And they've made it easy to get those accounts. There's a form 4547 from the IRS. A lot of people have already filled those out as part of their 2025 tax returns earlier this year. If you haven't yet, can search for information on that and how to do that. That will, if your child is born within that time frame, that will set you up for the $1,000 seed deposit. But that would also enable you to open an account, because you can open an account for any child under the age of 18. So even if you're not getting that seed money, you can still open the account. You can make contributions to that account after July 4th of this year. That's when this will all go into practice. But you can already, as I said, set these accounts up by filling out that form. So what you'll be able to do once they're officially open and seated is you'll be able to make up to $5,000 a year in contributions to these accounts. Employers will be able to contribute within set limits. You'll also be able to get, I think, contributions from other people into them. There are also a number of philanthropic organizations that are offering to provide additional seed deposits to these accounts. Sometimes they're in certain geographies or zip codes. So there's certainly a lot that can benefit people and their children long term. Once the child turns 18, that account basically becomes a traditional IRA account.
Okay.
And then it's subject to the rules that govern traditional IRAs, which means you can withdraw the money. The child the account becomes theirs. They can withdraw the money after age 18, but they would pay income tax and a 10% penalty. To withdraw money from it without the 10% penalty, you can only do that after age 59 and a half. Also, between now and age 18, while there are still Trump accounts, they are invested. And I think we're still waiting for more details on exactly what this will be, but they're going to be very low fee, but broad-based index funds.
Okay.
So you don't really have a choice. Unlike with 529 plans that we talked about, sometimes that could be a little bit of a barrier for people figuring out. But in this, that won't be a barrier, because it's just going to be, you're going to have sort of a limited choice in terms of how it's invested. That's what Trump accounts are. I guess some of the big differences versus 529 plans to be aware of is, so because people may think like, well, if I have that, why should I bother, saving for college, right? I can just contribute to this account. So we did mention the first issue, the taxes. So with a 529 plan, earlier we mentioned that the money that goes in is post-tax, federal tax. But when you go to make withdrawals, those withdrawals are tax-free as long as they're being spent on qualified education expenses. And we've already sort of talked about a lot of the things that are qualified: K through 12, college, graduate school, vocational programs, all of those things. As long as you're spending money on things like tuition, room and board, books, supplies, materials, things like that, you can withdraw that money tax-free. So all those earnings in your account, unlike earnings in a mutual fund, say, there you would be paying probably capital gains tax when you go to withdraw money from a mutual fund. You wouldn't be paying any of that. So every penny that you have in your 529 plan is a penny that you have to spend on education, as long as it's being spent on those qualified education expenses. So that's a big benefit. So that wouldn't be the case with Trump accounts, which would be subject to income tax at the child's rate, which is probably going to be relatively low, but still, it's going to take some of it out, and that 10% penalty as well. We already talked a lot about the flexibility of 529 plans, all the different ways that they can be spent. But the other important thing that distinguishes 529 plans is control for the account owner. So Trump accounts will become the child's account after age 18, and it is really set up as a retirement account. Whereas 529 plans remain in the account owner's control. So, for example, for you, you have a 529 plan for your daughter, you mentioned. Let's say you have another child and you open another 529 plan for them. If when your daughter gets to college age, she decides she's not going to college, you have options for that money. That money doesn't just automatically go to her. So you could, for example, name your second child a beneficiary of that account as well, or you can transfer some money over. So you have different options of what you can do, but you decide. The child isn't making that decision.
Mhm.
So they can't just withdraw the money and say, yeah, I'll pay whatever taxes and
Yeah.
yeah, and penalty I have and go off and travel the world. If that's, something that you're aligned with. So those are some important distinctions. So really what we say to people is think about what you're saving for, like what your objective is, what your goal is, and then align the vehicle that you're using to that objective. So Trump accounts are great for long-term savings. They can give your kids a big head start,
Mhm.
that they have something set aside for their later years. That we know that that's a big problem for a lot of people in America is not having enough retirement savings, and that's really what these are intended for. Unlike 529 plans, which are more for what is the child doing to get from high school to that next stage in life and be successful.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Just yeah, helping folks understand how these are very different, but can be quite complementary
Yeah.
tools
Yep.
for supporting their kids. So as we begin to wrap up, I have two last questions, Martha.
Yeah.
One is what's one thing that you wish that families understood more clearly about 529s? If you just kind of like synthesize that into one thing.
Yeah. I mean, we have talked about so many of the things right now that so many of the ways that that people can use 529 plans. So it really is about the fact that there's so many ways to spend the money. So people who are still concerned that they're going to be their hands are going to be tied and they're not going to be able to use the money really should not be concerned about that anymore. The other, keep in mind that we've talked about you can change beneficiaries. You can even make yourself a beneficiary. So with all the different ways that you can withdraw money tax free from a 529 plan, there just really shouldn't be a concern that you're not going to use that money. There's so many options today. So I think that's the biggest, takeaway.
No, that's I think that's a really great thing to reinforce. And then my last question, I'd love just to hear a little bit more about your work at Saving
Yeah.
College and how you're supporting students and families. Definitely would encourage everyone to, check that out. If you're, looking to go deeper into to the world of 529s. But yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more about your work there.
Yeah, thank you. We are really sort of have the greatest depth and breadth when it comes to information on 529 plans. I think you can find anywhere on the web. We've
Yes.
been around for over 25 years. The website was started by a CPA, and so it comes from a very objective and authoritative place in terms of how we write the information that we provide to people. So, in addition to hundreds of articles, really covering all those little nuanced questions that people have on 529 plans. I've already mentioned a couple of the calculators we have. So we have a number of calculators and tools that people find useful on our site. We have this detailed information on all the states and the plan, so you can easily find what the rules are in your state and see what's offered by your state. So, and just learn more about the 529 plans that are out there. So we've got all kinds of information that's available to just kind of help people get started. A lot of our audience has told us in the past, when we've talked to them, that we help them confirm that a 529 plan is the right choice for them. And then we also help them, the information on our site has helped them to choose, the 529 plan that they use. So those are some things we do. And more recently, we're really just trying to modernize the site in different ways and make the experience more intuitive and seamless for people. So we actually are working with a couple of 529 plan partners right now. We don't sell 529 plans ourselves, but we do sort of help people discover them and get to the plans websites where they can open plans. But
Mhm.
we are experimenting with a couple of partners where we've been able to work with them to make it easy for people to open the plan without leaving our site
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
essentially just go through, yeah, a really streamlined enrollment process that's quick and easy and painless and get started. And that's gone really well. So we're excited about that and hoping to do more in that way.
No, that's great. Yeah, we'll definitely include some links in the show notes just for folks to go a little bit deeper on this. Well, yeah, really appreciate the time, Martha. I think this has been a great episode. A lot of really fantastic information for students. I know this world is changing so quickly, so appreciate just getting all of your insight and perspective.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be able to share information with people who can use it and learn more about 529 plans.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of Office Hours with Will Geiger. If you're a student or parent, don't forget to check out app.scholarships360.org, where you can sign up for our free scholarship matching platform. For colleges, we've got solutions to make your work easier, which you can check out at connect.scholarships360.org. And one last thing, if you or someone you know would make a great guest on the show, I'd love to hear from you. You can always reach me by email or on LinkedIn. Until next time, thanks again for listening.